Hey there everybody, Electro here, and today I'm just sort of going to go through the beginnings of a track and kind of give you some tips and stuff along the way, and also sort of show you what kind of basic elements I like to put in to start off a track. So the first thing I'm going to do is just put in some drums. I usually use the Machinist, but just to save some time, I'm going to use the 909. Alright, so you can see here the meter's clipping a little bit red from that clap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the volume down a little. When you're seeing red in the Centroid here, that's bad. For some people that might seem very obvious, but you generally don't want any red going on anywhere here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to throw on some distortion here. Very, very light distortion. I'm going to set the drive all the way to 0. And that will actually very slightly saturate the sound. Alright, so you see there how it's sort of been slightly changed there and it's not clipping red anymore. I'm just going to add a little bit of boost in the high end. Just going to turn my frequency here to the top and just give it a dB or so of boost. So you see there how that kind of brings it out just a little. When you're EQing, you don't just want to be savagely turning up the gain. That's bad. You just want to be sort of working in ranges of about a dB or 2 or 3. Okay, so we have our basic drum pattern. Let's throw that down here. And I'm just going to copy this pattern and make myself a fill. So notice here I'm not going too crazy with the drums. Another very common mistake I see a lot of beginners do is they'll just kind of add like a million of these on everything and it winds up sounding like a bit of a mess. So if you're just starting out, try not to use too many notes. Just something simple. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is make some chords. Now, if you don't know how to make some chords, I suggest you check out my other video where I do exactly that. And I show you a pretty easy way to figure out how to do this. So I'm going to do here, I'm going to switch this to saw. You see I have my SD tune here that makes it kind of a nice little pad sound. I'm going to switch my quantize to bar, and then I'm just going to figure out some pads here. So I'm just going to change the amplitude envelope on here just to make it more of a sort of drawn out pad sound. Okay, so now that I have that, I can very easily start working on some of my other sounds. So first thing I'm going to do here is add a square wave. I'm going to do a bit of filter envelope with a decay. And that should give me a pretty basic bass sound. Turn this octave down a couple. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just sort of going to follow these notes in this chord, just kind of randomly. Now making basses is pretty easy. Once you have the note that you're going to be using, you can just use sort of different rhythmic patterns. Like, I'll show you what I mean. So like, I mean, you could have that. Or you could bounce between octaves. See what we got here. A3. Can be a very good idea to turn on mono for your basses because the release timing will have very low frequencies overlapping each other, and that can cause a bit of muddiness. So it can be a good idea to turn on mono. I'm going to turn on pulse width modulation here to sort of change the tone of the bass. So yeah, you see we're using the A key here. And now all I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy paste this over to different notes along the way. Alright, so you may have noticed that I didn't use the bottom key for this. I used the middle key because this is actually an inverted chord, which I went over in my other video, which you can go check out. Okay, so now we have our bass. Let me just change this color here. Gotta have purple bass. And then go. Okay, so now we got sort of our first two instruments going, and we're going to want to add one more instrument here, which will be sort of the main synth of the track. When I'm making tracks, and generally when most people make tracks, you want a few things looping, patterns, and then you want something over top that's a little more dynamic and changing. That could be a vocal or a guitar, or in this case, since we're making electronic music, a synth. Alright, so I'm just going to set myself up a delay here. I'm going to spread the delay. Turn level all the way up. And then 2. Okay, so we already have a fair amount of stuff going on in the low end, so I'm just going to roll that off. All I'm doing here is cutting out some of the low end of this synth so that it's not interfering with my bass kick and my bass sound. I'll turn this to saw. Add some pulse width modulation. I'm going to turn on mono and give this a little bit of release. I'm going to add a second saw and set it to the same octave and detune it slightly here. Add a little bit of filter envelope. And some keyboard tracking to give it a little bit more life. I'm going to change the pan of these slightly. Okay, so now we have our sort of basic sound worked up. Let's try to make a melody here. Alright, so I guess that's good enough. Let's just change this to green here. And now what I'm going to do, that I have my basic patterns up, is I'm going to add a little bit of automations just to sort of spice up how the pattern sounds. So as you can see, we have a lot of clipping here. And by the way, you might want to turn your limiter off when you're mixing your song just so you can see how it's clipping, because if you have the limiter on, it can be a little harder to tell what you're doing in terms of your volume level. But generally clipping is bad and we don't want that. So let's just see if we can fix this up a little. So I'm just testing out the bass here and the kick, just sort of assessing the level of what's going on. And as you can see here, I just added a little bit of side chaining to this bass line, just to sort of duck it under the kick a little and give the mix a little bit more room. You can see that it's clipping just a little. That's fine, it's just the clap, and it's okay to have a little bit of clipping. So next I'm going to add in my main synth line here and see if we can get everything to fit properly. Right, so that's sort of the basic elements of a track. I could do a lot more to this track, but I don't want this video to be insanely long. So let me just discuss a little bit about some of the things I've done here. First thing, you don't want to have a million synths going on down here. You want to have a dedicated role for each synth and give it its own space in the mix. And this is one of the most important keys to making a good mix. It's not all your EQs and everything else. Really, it's how you design your sounds, A, and B, it's also what octave you're playing your notes in and how frequent they are. So like, as you can see here, I have sort of a busier pattern, and then the chords are kind of a longer pattern. This is somewhere kind of in the middle. And we have our chord sounds spread out to the stereo sides, our bass in the bottom frequency, and our synth in the mid and upper frequencies, and our drums. And that about fills out the entire mix. So again, you don't want to be having like 5 million things going on at the same time. That will cause a lot of problems in making your mix way too loud. And as you can see, even with just these instruments, it's still clipping a lot. You want to try and keep those levels down and keep your sounds organized. Another thing you'll notice is I haven't used too many effects. I don't have delays on everything and EQs everywhere and stuff like that. It's just sort of some very basic stuff. And when you're starting out with your track, you want to have everything like that, and you want it sounding good without having all sorts of effects piled on. Because the more effects you have piled on, the more washed out your sound will get, and the less definitive the effects you do use will sound. Anyways, I hope you took away a few things from this tutorial. I'm not sure if it's going to be helpful to you or not, but I may do something like this again in the future. Anyways, this is Electro signing out.